mind of enterprise, of course the choice was to resonate with the heart of enterprise. When I just saved the file, I realized that the acronym is MOE, which also stands for Management Operations Environment. It's an interesting coincidence. My objective today is to draw your attention to a potential area of research. And I think it could be a very fruitful one, to try to collaborate, to realize a collaboration between management cybernetics and cognitive science. Just like cybernetics, cognitive science is interdisciplinary, or if you prefer, transdisciplinary. It includes anthropology, neuroscience, linguistics, psychology, artificial intelligence, and affective science, by the way. But maybe unlike cybernetics, in the last 30 years, it's a very active area of research. And it brings quite interesting things. One of the ideas that is sort of new is that the thinking, the mind, doesn't happen in the brain. It happens in the dynamics between the body and the environment. Now, globally, that is not really a very new idea. About 2 millennia ago, in the Mahayana tradition, Buddhist tradition, it was already something established. What is new, though, is that in the way it is brought now, it seriously challenges established beliefs in the areas of evolution, genetics, robotics, linguistics, and many others. It brings also new ways to treat diseases. So it's worth having that in. So that's the kind of question I put, but not with intention to give a definitive answer, more to point to certain things that would be interesting to check out. But I believe that every story is a personal story. So before going into this, I would just very quickly tell you what I do with VSM. I will be talking about cognitive science, but I'm not a scientist. I'm a management consultant. And does every consultant have a toolbox? So if I put my tools in this space between diagnosis and design, and with a level of detail, I've been using a lot of modeling for almost 20 years in both dimensions, in different levels of detail. And also a lot of simulation, mainly discrete event processing, but also a bit of agent-based simulation. I had a short flirt with system dynamics as well. And recently, data mining and process mining. And of course, VSM has played a very important role, but as you might notice, it is not inside the modeling part. Now, very quickly, I'm not going to talk about all the great things about VSM. I think we all know them. Maybe quickly a bit of a few issues with VSM, which were mentioned already, and some of them were with VSM diagrams that I had. So I had no issue with the model as explained in the text and as I applied it, but when I tried to make diagrams, I always had some issues with them. I'll not go through them. There is an article you can read about it, and also a few others. And for the diagram, I tried to solve it by different rendition. With this different rendition, I probably solved a few of the problems in some way and created new ones. I'm not going to go through it now, but it's already quite old. I have to update it. But my point is that even though I had this new rendition, which is completely compliant with the text, just different representation, I still didn't use it for modeling. And the reason for that is mainly because of the observer perspective. So I couldn't find a good solution between system and subsystem representation and relations. Now, if we have a system formation which is something which is not the environment, and then subsystems doing re-entry in the same way, then The other approaches like whole part or set subset would not deal with that well. And also technology-wise, most of the technologies would not support ideas which relate to dealing with paradoxes. And Luhmann said it quite well about how it is not about between whole and part, and system subsystem is completely different. So what I'm doing instead is using VSM as glasses, and I've been repeatedly corrected about this. It's lenses, but I want to stress that it's glasses because yes, there is VSM lens, but also there is a VSM bias, and that is about the application. About communication, I try to avoid this jargon completely. Instead, what was a successful way to communicate it was a set of workshops or different practices around something which I call essential biases in organization, in which you recognize a lot of things already from the VSM, like between autonomy, cohesion, diversity, stability, exploration, exploitation, and all around that. So that was shortly about where is the place of VSM. Now, this idea of combining cybernetics and cognitive science is not new. Of course, they've been playing together for quite some time. And if I try to draw a map, I should also add philosophy at some point, because they've been in the map. The choice of these names is not necessarily for their important contribution, but also the ideas that are not just historically important, but they are currently very, very modern in various ways. So the idea is now, what could we bring also from cognitive science to VSM and from VSM to cognitive science? But I'll talk mostly for the first one. Maybe the second would be interested for another audience. Just quick history of the cognitive science. It has short history, about 45, 50 years. It started with the movement called cognitivism or cognitive revolution against behavioral psychology, and then connectionism inspired by the artificial neural networks, and then embodiment, and recently in action. All these schools, they coexist today. But this is roughly how they historically appeared. The cognitivism, the main idea is it has the metaphor of the mind is the computer. So the non-symbolic stimuli are translated, they're transduced into symbolic ones, then they're processed to a response. So cognition is understood as information processing, as manipulation of representations. Hand in hand with this idea is the functionalism of philosophy, and goes quite